welcome back to the She Lives Purposefully podcast. My name is Megan, and I am the host of this podcast. I am so thankful that you're here. Thank you for listening, whether it's your first time, week after week, whatever it is. I'm so thankful for you. Today, we are really diving into the topic of self-care. This was actually a question or topic that was requested on Instagram, and so I'm excited to dive into it. I don't think we've talked about it yet, but we're kind of just going to be diving into is self-care biblical? I feel like there can be some controversy around that, and what I think are some great ways for self-care, and especially how do I say this? I guess we'll dive into it, but yeah, some great ways for self-care. But I am stoked for this episode. I think it'll be just like a fun, lighthearted, but really good one, and I hope that you leave encouraged through this episode. So let's dive in. First, I want to say I feel like sometimes it can be kind of unpopular because the term self-care is very about self, and that's self-focused, and that can be selfish and different things like that. And I do think that focusing on self can be very selfish, and that's not what we're called to. We're called to a life of selflessness. However, I do think that caring for ourselves is actually really important. I think it's pretty vital. I don't think that we're called to completely forget ourselves. And I think there's this quote, I think it's from the book. I'm forgetting what the book is called. I'm so sorry. But the quote is basically saying how selflessness is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And so if we're thinking less of ourselves, we're thinking of ourselves down, then we're like, I don't deserve this. I don't need this. I'm not going to have this. Or I'm the worst, kind of mentality. We're thinking of ourselves less allows us to think more of the Lord, of other people, which is so awesome. But when it comes to self-care, I do think it is kind of a different area. I don't think I guess actually let's dive into two parts of this. The first part I want to say, or I was planning on saying, was I don't think it really affects necessarily our care of other people or makes us necessarily selfish, because I do think it's important to rest, to care for our bodies. And I think that those are huge parts of self-care and the reason for self-care. However, on the flip side of that, I will say, I will cop to, what is the term? I think there's a term, something like that. But I will say that sometimes we can be focused too much of ourselves and prioritize too much our quote unquote self-care, where it does leave out other people and it does neglect other people, where we're kind of saying no, I can't have this important, time with a friend who's in need because I need to focus on myself right now. And I just need time for myself, and again, sometimes we really do need it and we are running on complete and empty. And hopefully we are caring enough for ourselves that we're not totally on empty, or being renewed in the Lord that we're not totally on empty, but sometimes we are. But I do think sometimes we can take it way too far, where it's you know what, I just need a little me time. I'm going to go get my nails done. So I'm going to completely ignore the needs of others around me who are actually reaching out to me to be helped. So I will say that it can be selfish if we take it too far, but I don't think self-care itself is selfish. And I think it can be a really great thing, a time of being refreshed, being renewed, rest, and all of those things are really important. Now, I do want to say too, with all of that, I think when it comes to being renewed and rest and therefore self-care, a lot of times we look to certain things related to self-care that are not wrong in and of themselves at all, but a lot of times we kind of leave the Lord out of self-care. And I kind of want to bring him into it in this conversation, because I think our ultimate rest, our rejuvenation, our feeling renewed, renewed in spirit, in mind, in body, that rest and all of that renewal comes from God. That's the best place that we are going to get it. And so I think it's important to bring him into it, which is where a lot of my ideas for self-care that I want to talk about are actually going to come from. So again, I think that self-care, we're not called to completely neglect ourselves. I think that it's important that we do take care of ourselves, but also that we don't idolize it. I think that's very valid too. that part of the argument where we could say like, oh, we're idolizing it too much. But I do think it can be important. And I think that we can actually and should actually make sure that we're bringing the Lord into it if we want the realest, best form of rest and renewal. So I feel like a lot of times we do look at self-care like, all right, I'm going to go just like binge watch a TV show to relax, or I'm going to go make sure that I get my nails done, or I'm trying to think of other things off the top of my head. But those kind of examples, which, you know, getting your nails done or like watching a movie, totally not wrong in any way. I'm not trying to be legalistic about that. I do both of those things, and I probably do too much. Like not my nails. I haven't gotten my nails done maybe 9 months. Wow. I'm just trying to reflect on when the last time was. I'm getting them done this week though, so that's fun. But all of that to say is I think we look to those kinds of parts of self-care, which again are not bad and can be awesome, and they can be refreshing and relaxing, and that's great. However, sometimes those things, like especially binge watching TV, or like I'm just going to take a break right now and scroll on social media, sometimes those things can actually be draining and take us from a good productivity or a better self-care, a better sense of self-care and rest. I have a list of different ideas here that I want to share with you. So the first thing for self-care, and it might sound a little counterintuitive because it might require you getting up a little earlier, but maybe it doesn't. But if you can, and I think that there are different seasons, different people, different schedules, all of that. So this isn't, you know, a must-do list or anything. These are just kind of ideas that I was thinking of. But if you can, have a slower morning routine. I have found when I do this, it is such a great form of rest and renewal, because then you can take time to not rush, to be thankful, to spend time with Jesus, and your morning routine feels less and less like a checklist and things you have to get off, which I think, at least for me, kind of spikes the cortisol idea and almost gives me more anxiety. Like I have to get all these things done in like 30 minutes, you know, but actually allows me to have a slower morning and enjoy every task that I'm doing and not have it feel like a burden or a checklist, but have it just feel like it's part of my day. It's something that I'm doing. Maybe that's even as simple as like making coffee can feel like, when is it going to be ready, instead of this enjoyable process. And so having a slower morning routine, maybe it involves getting up a little earlier. And again, this is just an idea. I think there's different seasons where I'm in and out of that. Right now, I'm not so much in that. I think I'm just like third trimester pregnant. There's a lot going on. And so it's like, you know, getting up at a certain time, but then I'm just making sure I do have an actual checklist of things that I'm making sure I need to get done. And it's feeling less renewally, which now that I'm saying it out loud, I would love to change. So maybe I'll start doing that like tomorrow morning or something. It's feeling less renewally right now and feeling more like, okay, let's just get these things done. And I think that there's different seasons for that. So there's this isn't a must, or there's no condemnation in not doing this, but I do think it's a great way to kind of have a little self-care moment in the practical things of life where you're not having to go spend money to do this, or, you know, take out a huge chunk of time. It's already part of your day, but just slowing it down a little bit, I think can be really great. Another thing that I have here, of course, is, and this is going to seem super duper Christian, but this is a Christian podcast. So welcome to the She Lives Purposely podcast. And it might not even feel like it's self-care, but it really is. And that is taking time with Jesus. And the reason I, one, absolutely had to, and two, wanted to include this is because truly our renewal and our rest does come from the Lord. Our strength does come from the Lord. And so there are times when it feels like we are like have nothing that's going to give us strength in our day. Maybe we know it's going to be a draining day. Maybe it's been a draining week or a draining month. And there's no time to go do the things that we feel like we love for that self-care moment. But we do have time to spend with Jesus. This is actually the best place to regain strength, to be renewed, and to find rest is in Him and in spending time with Him. So listening to worship music, reading our Bibles, just making sure that we're filled with the things of God, whether it's throughout the day. I highly recommend taking like a chunk of time and doing that. Maybe that's in the morning, maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's an hour, who knows what time you have, but like actually spending time with God. And then if it is a lesser amount of time, especially that you can take a chunk of, to incorporate more of that throughout your day. It also can decrease anxiety and different things like that that are going to be draining to us as well. So spending time with God is where we will get our strength and be renewed and find rest. So I really encourage that as a form of actual self-care as well. And then just some other of my favorite forms of self-care. One that we did yesterday, we just got these kind of like lawn chair vibe things that recline in our backyard. And we were just sitting in them during our lunch hour, me and Donnie, and like had our lunch. Then we made we had a little sparkling water with lemon and lime in there, and we just sat out there, soaked in the vitamin D, and just laid there quietly. It was like the best time. Like, it just was so sweet, and we were chatting and stuff, but also just like being able to lay there and soak in the sun was so beautiful, so awesome. So that's one thing that I will say that I didn't have on this list, but I just thought of it from yesterday. So nice. I cannot wait to do that again. Like, it just was so calming and relaxing. And you just hear the birds around you and the grass and the breeze and then the sun on your skin. Oh, so nice. Even if you just pull out a blanket and put it in the grass, like, supreme. That's one of my favorite things. Taking a nap outside, also just supreme. But let's see. Also, walking and praying, walking and listening to a Christian podcast, walking with Christian friends, things like that. Walking is so great too. And, it's an action, but it is a form of self-care. It's actually going to leave you feeling better after doing it than before doing it, especially when you're filling it also with the things of God, whether that be, again, worship music that you have playing in your headphone. That I have a playlist if you want to listen to it. We have a Christian music and worship music playlist by She Lives Purposefully that's found on Spotify, so I can link that playlist for sure. Or, listening to a Christian podcast, or my friends and I, we love to go once a week and go on a walk. We're actually going tomorrow morning, which I'm really excited, and just chatting with them. It's been really sweet. And even like praying over each other, just like talking about different things, but they're people also filled with the Spirit of God that you are walking with, and you're getting that vitamin D, especially if it's outside, or specifically if it's outside. You're moving your body, which is great. It's going to feel better than you did beforehand. And then also filling that up with things of God too, which is super awesome. Another thing that I have is here, again, worship while. And I'm saying that very generally because I think you can do that during a lot of things, or, listening to sermons or Christian podcasts or things like that, but filling up with the things of God while doing XYZ. Because I think a lot of us feel like, I just don't have the time for self-care right now. Like, it's just not in my schedule. It's not in my day. But we can fill ourselves up with the source of our strength and the source of our rest and renewal, which is God, while we're doing other things. So maybe we're cooking, maybe we're cleaning, maybe we're running errands, we're dropping the kids off at school, we're going to school, we're going to work, whatever it may be. During those things that are already part of our day, we can fill up with the things of God and get that rest and renewal and strength. So maybe it's listening to, again, Christian worship playlist, plugging the SLP one, or a radio station that's Christian, or Christian podcasts, or sermons, different things. I think that can be a great way to incorporate the most best source of self-care that you're going to get, which is, finding it in Jesus, and just incorporating that already into your day instead of finding a new space to find that. Can also feel like, okay, like I don't have to find a whole new hour to do something new. Like, I can just incorporate this right here, right now. Instead of, making an appointment for a massage or something like that. All that's great too. But, if we're lacking in time, like, this is a great way to get self-care in. All right. Another thing too, which is going to seem silly, and this has no biblical tie to it right now, but maybe I'll come up with something as I'm talking about it. But just doing an everything shower with no rush. I feel like so often my showers, I feel rushed, like I'm thinking of the next thing that I have to do, but doing an everything shower and just like relaxing during it is so great. Maybe putting on a little like non-toxic bath bomb or something that's like going to diffuse great like scents into the air while you're showering, having eucalyptus like in your shower, listening to worship or something during that time, or maybe it's just you and the quiet in the shower. So nice. Doing an everything shower with no rush is what's the word I was looking for? Underrated form of self-care. Underrated was the word. Another thing too, I would say, is the way that we eat can be a form of self-care. Eating better can really impact our mood and it can impact our body in huge ways. And so if I am eating trash food, which I personally enjoy doing, but my body and my mind are actually going to be impacted by that. It is going to affect the different hormones in my body. It's going to affect then like how I'm physically feeling and mentally feeling and emotionally feeling. It'll make me more tired and just like, feeling blech. And so actually eating good food that gives us nutrients and nourishment and fills us up and actually helps our body and minds feel better is another kind of more simple form of self-care too. And then this is something specifically if you are somebody who works from home, I would highly recommend this. This is something I don't do enough and I need to do, and it has been so great every single time that I do it, but is actually getting out of the house and going to like a coffee shop to work or just to go get coffee or something, interact with other people. This is so important. I think in this post-COVID era where we are so often at home, we're so often isolated, we're working from home, we're living at home, doing different things, maybe even if it's hybrid, different things like that, we become so isolated. And so to actually be able to go out, which, 5 years ago, this would have been like, this is the dumbest tip I've ever heard. I'm always outside with other people. But now it's like a totally different era. And I know so many people who are cooped up working from home a lot. Go outside, go talk to somebody, even if it's a barista, spend time there where humans are around you interacting, make a friend come with you. Different things like that can be so great as a form of like mental self-care as well, for sure. Let's see what other things. Okay, that's pretty much my whole list. But I just wanted to say, tying that all together, there are so many things that we can do for self-care, for being just like, caring for ourselves. I love getting massages. I love getting my nails done. I love, getting a little treat and a little lunch and hanging out with friends. All of that is awesome. But I do want to say, like, we are going to find our absolute best sense, again, of rest and renewal and strength when we are in the Lord and when we're seeking him. And that's where we're going to find it. So in our quiet time with him and involving him throughout our day, that's where we're going to find our best sense of feeling renewed and feeling strengthened. And so I hope that is a big takeaway from today's episode because it's super important. But I hope the other aspects were really fun too. I feel like this was even a fun reminder for me to like, okay, do these things if you're feeling overwhelmed or depleted and all of that. So I needed this episode. I hope it was encouragement. I hope that it was an encouragement to you. And now it is time for Dear Meg. Before we jump into Dear Meg, I do want to say, if you love the She Lives Purposely podcast, if you're encouraged by the podcast, the best two ways that you can love on the podcast is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I read all of the reviews. Leave a rating wherever you're listening from. Be sure you're subscribed, all of that good stuff, so that other people who are like looking for podcasts and see the podcast can see, okay, this is what this many people are saying about the podcast. I will give it a listen. I will be encouraged here. And it'll bring in, number one, like more women in this community, but also just in hopes to encourage and equip more women in their walk with Christ in this Christian living podcast space. So that's a great way. And then two, of course, to share it with your friends, whether that's in your favorite go-to group chat or group chats plural, or on social media, whatever that may be. That's the best way that you can love on the podcast. All right, so let's dive into this Dear Meg question that I have here. Dear Meg, I am unable to go to church other than online. Sometimes I go to church with my cousin, but that's only a few times a year. Is that okay? I really like this question because I feel like it's something that became a big topic around the time of COVID, like virtual church and things like that. So I think it's really important, and I'm going to say this first and foremost because she says, I am unable to go to church other than online. If you are unable to go to church, then like the fact that then like, and just doing it virtually, that is totally okay. Like, I think that this era of having a lot of virtual services and things like that can have its downfalls where people who can make it out to church are opting to not. And I totally get that temptation. I have given into that temptation one too many times. But we're opting to not gather with the body of Christ. But if we can't gather with the body of Christ, this new kind of use of technology of having virtual services is actually so incredible because we're able to bring church to people, which is so great for people who can't come in, who maybe feel isolated, who want that encouragement, but they can't go. And so virtual church is an awesome, awesome, awesome resource. And I would encourage you, like, know that there is no condemnation, no shame. Like, if you can't make it out, you can't make it out. And the Lord is meeting you where you are. The Lord is with you in the room when you are watching church online. He is with you all the time. And you are not missing out on Jesus by not being able to go to church in person. And that's awesome when somebody can bring you, like you were saying, your cousin. That's awesome. Thank the Lord for your cousin. Like, that's so great. Seriously, like, I feel like we just need more people like that who can bring us to things that maybe we can't go to, or even just like a helping hand in different situations. That's an awesome use of like one family, but also the body of Christ. But I do just want to encourage you to like let go of any sense of condemnation or shame that you're feeling. Like, if you can't make it out, you can't make it out. And the Lord knows your heart and he sees that, and he will meet you where you are. Like, he's not just in the building of church. If you can make it out, I think it is important to like gather with the saints. But if you can't, again, like I said, the Lord is with you in that room. And I think that virtual church is an awesome resource that we haven't really utilized until like the pandemic as much. A lot of churches did. I guess like my church specifically didn't really as much before. But so I think that is a great, great, great resource. And I would encourage you too, like if you feel like if you're lacking in church community, if there are ways for you to reach out to people that you know that are Christians, like invite them over, different things, I would recommend like maybe trying to incorporate Christian community in that sense, like inviting people over and stuff. But I just want this to be just a quick answer right now, like no shame whatsoever. I think that virtual church is an awesome resource for exactly situations like this where we physically can't make it that day, or long term. Maybe we can't make it long term, whatever the situation may be. And so know that Jesus is absolutely with you wherever you're listening from. And that's my answer on that, friends. I hope this episode was an encouragement, a little fun chat today. Thank you so much for listening to the She Lives Purposely podcast. I am so thankful for you. Like I said before, whether you are a weekly listener, whether you're a new listener, I am so stoked that you're here. Friends, live for Jesus and live purposefully. I'll see you later.